In the quiet marshes north of San Francisco Bay, something strange started happening beneath the water. Fishermen noticed it first. Their crab traps, once heavy with invasive green crabs, started coming up different. Fewer crabs, smashed shells scattered across the mudflats. Something was hunting them, and hunting them fast. For years, the green crab had been a problem nobody could solve. It tore through native shellfish. It destroyed eelgrass beds. It spread faster than any control program could manage. Then the otters came back. Not many. A small, scattered population, slowly recolonizing marshes they had vanished from more than a century ago. Biologists expected them to eat what they always ate: clams, mussels, slow, easy prey. Instead, something unexpected showed up in their stomachs: green crab shells, piles of them. At first, researchers thought it was a coincidence, a few otters experimenting with a new food source. But as more otters returned to more marshes, the pattern grew stronger. Crab numbers dropped. Eelgrass came back. Water clarity improved in places scientists hadn't expected to change for decades. Nobody had predicted this, and the deeper researchers looked, the more they realized this wasn't a simple story about one animal eating another. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The marshes near San Pablo Bay stretch for miles, quiet and half forgotten by most people who drive past them. For decades, this ecosystem had been struggling. Green crepes, first introduced through ballast water on the East Coast, had crept into California waters and multiplied without control. Wildlife biologist Daniel Reyes had spent years tracking their spread. He knew the numbers. He knew the damage. What he didn't know was that the solution had already returned, quietly, without anyone noticing. It started with a single tracking collar. A sea otter, tagged only as M2, kept showing up in areas biologists hadn't expected. Shallow channels, narrow mudflats, places otters historically avoided. Reyes assumed the data was faulty. Otters preferred deeper water, near kelp or rocky shoreline, not thick, muddy marsh. But the signal kept repeating. When his team finally went out to check the site, what they found stopped them cold. Crab shells, dozens of them, cracked open with precision, scattered along a narrow feeding trail. Reyes had seen otters eat crabs before, but never like this. Never in these numbers. Never in a place otters had no historical record of using. One of the rangers with him, Thomas Hale, crouched down and picked up a shattered shell. "This isn't random," he said. "This looks deliberate." Reyes didn't answer right away, because if Hale was right, it meant the otters weren't just adapting. They were changing their entire hunting behavior. And if that was true, something about this marsh had shifted long before anyone started paying attention. Reyes brought the samples back to the lab, but the questions only multiplied. He pulled up satellite tracking data from the past 2 years. What he saw didn't match anything in the official otter recovery reports. Otters were showing up in marshes far outside their known range. Not just one or two individuals, dozens. He called in a colleague, marine ecologist Paul Ainsworth, to review the data. Ainsworth had studied California otter populations for over a decade. He'd never seen movement patterns like this. "They're not exploring," Ainsworth said, staring at the map. "They're establishing territory." That word hit harder than expected. Territory meant permanence. It meant otters weren't passing through. They were staying. To confirm it, the team set up motion-triggered cameras along several marsh channels. What the footage showed left even Ainsworth speechless. Otters weren't just eating crabs opportunistically. They were actively digging through mud, flipping rocks, and searching burrows most predators ignored. One clip showed an otter pulling 4 crabs from a single burrow in under 2 minutes. Local fisherman Carl Whitfield, who had worked these waters for over 20 years, said something researchers hadn't considered. "I used to lose half my bait to crabs," he said. "This year, my traps are nearly empty." At first, that sounded like good news. But then the water samples came back. Something in the marsh chemistry was shifting faster than any natural recovery timeline should allow. And nobody could explain why the change was accelerating instead of stabilizing. The water samples came back from the lab 3 days later, and Reyes read them twice before believing it. Dissolved oxygen levels were rising. Sediment turbidity was dropping. Numbers that normally took a decade to shift were changing within a single season. Something was accelerating the marsh's recovery far beyond what predation alone should cause. Ainsworth pulled up old survey records from the 1980s, back before the green crab invasion collapsed local eelgrass beds. He compared them to the new data. The eelgrass wasn't just recovering. It was spreading into areas that hadn't held vegetation in over 30 years. Reyes drove out to the site himself, wanting to see it firsthand. Standing at the edge of the marsh, he noticed something he hadn't expected. Fish, small schools of juvenile fish, moving through channels that had been empty mudflats the year before. Ranger Thomas Hale met him there, holding a water sample kit. His expression was unreadable. "It's not just the crabs disappearing," Hale said. "It's everything underneath them." Reyes didn't understand at first. Then Hale explained. Green crabs hadn't just eaten shellfish. They destabilized the entire root systems holding the marsh together. With the crabs gone, the marsh wasn't just recovering. It was rebuilding itself from the ground up. But that raised a darker question neither of them expected. If removing one invasive species could trigger this much unpredictable change this fast, what happened if the otter population grew even further? Nobody had modeled that scenario. And as satellite data came in that same week, it was already becoming clear. The otters weren't slowing down. By the following month, the otter population had nearly doubled across 3 separate marsh systems. Reyes expected the crab numbers to keep falling. What he didn't expect was how the rest of the ecosystem would respond. New burrows appeared where crabs once dominated. Native shrimp populations, absent for years, began reappearing in survey nets. Even shorebirds, rarely seen in these channels, started returning to feed. Ainsworth called it a cascade effect. One predator, reintroduced to a damaged system, was triggering changes far beyond simple predation. But cascades don't always stay controlled. During a routine survey, Hale noticed something troubling. In areas with the highest otter density, mussel populations were dropping sharply, not from crabs, but from the otters themselves. The very species helping the marsh recover was now competing with the native prey it depended on. Reyes felt the shift in tone during the next team meeting. Excitement turned into caution. If otter numbers kept climbing without natural limits, the same predator that solved one problem could create another. Then came the detail that changed everything. A necropsy on a deceased otter found along the marsh edge revealed unusually high levels of domoic acid, a toxin linked to harmful algal blooms. Reyes stared at the report, stomach tightening. If crabs weren't the only thing driving this change, if toxins in the water were reshaping which prey survived and which didn't, then this recovery wasn't as clean as it looked. Something else was influencing the entire system, and it had been there long before the otters ever returned. Reyes and his team traced the algal bloom back to its source, and the answer surprised no one more than him. Agricultural runoff, drifting downstream for decades, had quietly fed the blooms long before anyone connected them to the marsh's collapse. The green crabs had thrived in the damaged system. The otters, returning after generations of absence, hadn't just controlled a pest. They had exposed a problem hiding beneath the surface the entire time. With that discovery, local agencies shifted focus. Instead of only tracking otter populations, they began monitoring runoff levels alongside them. Ainsworth put it simply during a public briefing. The otters didn't just fix an invasive species problem, he said. They showed us a bigger one we'd been ignoring. Over the following 2 years, restoration crews worked alongside biologists to reduce runoff and rebuild buffer zones along the marsh edge. Crab populations stabilized at manageable levels. Eelgrass beds spread further than they had in half a century. Fish, shrimp, and shorebird numbers held steady instead of collapsing again. Reyes still visits the marsh regularly, checking data that once confused him. He no longer sees it as a story about one predator eating one invasive species. He sees it as a warning and a lesson about how deeply connected these systems really are. A single animal, returning to a place it once called home, uncovered a slow-moving crisis no one had noticed. Today, sea otters continue expanding through California's marshes, quietly reshaping ecosystems most people never looked twice at. What else might be hiding beneath the surface of the places we've stopped paying attention to? If you want to see where nature reveals the truth first, subscribe and stay curious.